Hey everyone, you're watching GamerBrain, and let's look at 8 sequels that flopped. 8. Twisted Metal 3. Not even a soundtrack by Rob Zombie could save this doomed sequel from negative reviews and scores of angry fans. The Twisted Metal series was at the pinnacle of its popularity after Twisted Metal 2 dazzled fans and critics alike with its dark graphics and insanely good gameplay. By the time Twisted Metal 3 rolled around in 1998, however, the developers at Single Track and 989 Studios were involved in a lawsuit, and the series would not be the same for years to come. As a result, Twisted Metal 3 features level designs that are bland and non-interactive. The save feature had been replaced with a goofy password system, and the physics engine was one of the worst to be found on the PS1. Since Single Track owned the licensing rights to the game's original engine, 989 Studios had to develop a new engine on the spot, and it shows. The result just doesn't feel like a Twisted Metal game, and most fans agree. Another step back was how male and female characters now screamed exactly alike when they blew up. This is a minor detail, but it's also a good example that shows how the new developers weren't even paying attention to little things that the previous installments had already done better. The game still sold very well, but only because players were expecting something on par with the rest of the series. Whereas Twisted Metal 2 sold 1.74 million copies in the United States, Twisted Metal 3 only managed to sell 1.29 million copies. It's respectable, but one can only wonder how many copies the original team would have sold. Meanwhile, the series' name was almost all but ruined, making this sequel a flop as far as quality and reputation is concerned. 989 Studios would make one more Twisted Metal game before giving up and returning the series back to its rightful owners for Twisted Metal Black on the PlayStation 2. 7. Fallout: Brotherhood of Steel. A lot of people were upset with Fallout 4 for its lack of interesting dialogue options and linear quests.
That'll teach you to look at me, craphead.
I ain't serving you bastards a freaking thing unless I get paid for the last 6 rounds. Oh, crap!
But this game is not the first time the Fallout universe has been massively overhauled. In 2004, Interplay developed and released Fallout Brotherhood of Steel for the PS2 and original Xbox, and it didn't feel like much of a Fallout game at all. Players were shocked to find the open-ended world they had grown to love had been replaced with generic levels. You couldn't go back to places you had already visited, and the 6 playable characters already came with background stories that you couldn't change, making this far from a create-your-own-story role-playing game that the fans were used to. As such, hardcore fans of the Fallout series were quick to jump down this game's throat. They did not like how there were no stats to raise, no weight limits, and they hated the simplified perk system that only let you improve your health, damage, or learn a new move. Worst of all, the turn-based combat system was replaced with a Diablo-style hack-and-slash clone style of gameplay that did not feel like Fallout. Speaking of not feeling like a Fallout game, Fallout Brotherhood of Steel pretty much ditches the 1950s science fiction feel and replaces it with boring environments and next to no character development. Sometimes the game kind of feels like a bad western at times, but there isn't much of a tribute to the previous installments. Overall, there was a lot of excitement around Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. Gamers could not wait to play a new Fallout game with next-generation graphics. The feeling of anticipation was not unlike Fallout 3, only this time it just didn't pay off. Interplay quickly cancelled Fallout Brotherhood of Steel 2 and hoped nobody would ever remember this mistake of a game. 6. Ultima 9: Ascension. Here is a game that pretty much single-handedly ruined an entire series that dates back all the way to the early 80s. Ultima 9: Ascension is one of those special kinds of bad that gets nearly everything wrong, on all fronts: graphics, gameplay, and story. This is a fantasy series that's steeped in years of magical lore, and yet you start off the game as a regular person inside of your bedroom. You see your television, computer, and other 20th century technology. why choose to have the tutorial level take place in the real world? It's as if the developers were playing a joke. Unfortunately, the rest of the game hardly makes any sense either. There are so many plot holes that the game basically disregards the rest of the series. At one point, your character literally asks what a paladin is.
What's a paladin?
Shouldn't they already know such a basic class? Mix in a ton of game-breaking bugs and Ultima 9 basically becomes one gigantic mess. You don't really play this game so much as get through it. Not even multiple patches could fix the game, and it would regularly crash on pretty much any computer. This game doomed the series so badly that they decided to just stick with Ultima Online instead of even thinking about making any others. It is now 17 years later, and there still hasn't been another Ultima game since. 5. Grand Theft Auto 2. The Grand Theft Auto series started as a pixelated shoot-'em-up game with a permanent top-down perspective. Here's a fun fact: the instruction manual says that this camera angle is supposed to represent a news helicopter's point of view as it follows your character around on his spree of destruction. Even back in 1997, people were really impressed by Grand Theft Auto 1's wide-open sandbox system, which allowed you to do pretty much whatever you want without following the main storyline. It was one of the first games where the missions were optional. When Grand Theft Auto 2 was released in 1999, people couldn't wait to see what the developers at Rockstar and DMA Design had done to further the series. Unfortunately, it wasn't much. Grand Theft Auto 2 was technically the third release in the series. An expansion pack called Grand Theft Auto London 1969 was released earlier in 1998, so by the time Grand Theft Auto 2 came around 1 year later, players were already familiar with the series and ready to see something new. Instead, they got barely upgraded graphics and sound effects. By now, the series was growing stale. To be fair, the game did include some improvements. You still only had 5 lives, but now you had a health meter and could at least take some damage. You also had an improved save feature. The first Grand Theft Auto only lets you save after you beat an entire map, which can sometimes take hours. In Grand Theft Auto 2, you can save whenever you want, but you have to spend $50,000 and you have to find a safe house, which is hard considering the game had no GPS or map. Also, the game now has a gang system that lets you choose which gangs to help and which gangs to go to war against. This adds depth to the gameplay, but it also results in huge areas of the map where you can't go without being attacked, which most players agreed made missions much harder and exploration less fun. Tons of frustrating bugs didn't help either. Overall, Grand Theft Auto 2 continued the trend of giving the player the freedom to explore the city around them, but gamers weren't as impressed this time around. It just felt like more of the same. Although Rockstar closely guards its official sales figures, the hotly anticipated sequel sold fairly well. By 2003, it had sold 200,000 copies. Still, the reviews of this mediocre sequel scared Rockstar enough to completely revamp the series and come out with the PlayStation 2 classic, Grand Theft Auto 3. 4. Ghoul Patrol. This is the Super Nintendo sequel to the cult classic Zombies Ate My Neighbors. It was released 1 year later, and, well, how to put this nicely, it really sucked. Aside from having the same 2 main characters, Zeke and Julie, Ghoul Patrol shies away from almost everything that made the first game so great. All of the humour and the fun graphics are completely gone. As if to highlight this, on the first level of Zombies Ate My Neighbors, you were fighting hordes of cool-looking zombies. In the first level of Ghoul Patrol, you're fighting books and office equipment. Yeah, that's not a good start. All of the memorable Hollywood-based monsters are gone. Zombies Ate My Neighbors paid tribute to classic horror movies, with characters like a Tommy doll instead of a Chucky doll, and a character that was a mix of Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th and Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all rolled into one. Other than that, you have the Blob, the creature from the Black Lagoon, werewolves, mummies, and all sorts of other recognizable monsters that made you want to play the next level just to see what's next. In Ghoul Patrol though, you have snails, sharks, samurai warriors and other enemies that just aren't very fun. The game also has darker and more serious graphics that seem out of place. Not only do they not fit in with the first game's cartoony atmosphere, but the monsters themselves also have lame pathfinding skills this time around. Most of the monsters walk in a predetermined pattern, and hardly any of them will chase after you. Your controls, on the other hand, are unresponsive and often get you killed. Overall, the gameplay is a massive step down from the original. All of the game's fun weapons are gone too. In the first one, you are fighting with quirky items like squirt guns and cans of soda pop. Most of the weapons are jokes. For example, you can kill werewolves with silverware in just one hit. It's ultra cheesy, but the first game does it just right. Ghoul Patrol, on the other hand, gives you a boring crossbow and some alien guns, and that's it. There's nothing necessarily wrong with these weapons, but after the first game, you were just expecting something funnier. That pretty much describes Ghoul Patrol in general. If you ever played Zombies Ate My Neighbors before, you were expecting way better. There's just nothing here that will make you crack a smile. As it turns out, Ghoul Patrol was never supposed to be a sequel to Zombies Ate My Neighbors. It seems as though the license got sold to a third-party developer in Malaysia called Motion Pixel. They tried to improve the series by adding a jump and a slide move, but they forgot to add the fun. The Super Nintendo version got such an average response that the Sega Genesis version was scrapped. Oddly enough, the Super Nintendo version has become more popular in recent years and now sells for a fair amount of money. Still, a proper sequel has never been made, and since LucasArts is no more, it doesn't look like one will be released anytime soon. 3. Bomberman Act Zero. If you've ever played a Bomberman game before, then serious is probably the last word that comes to mind. The game is about as silly and cartoony as it gets. For some reason though, Konami decided to try and turn Bomberman into a grim and dark series in 2006 with Bomberman Act Zero for the Xbox 360. Seriously, what were they thinking? Would you ever expect Bomberman to need 2 minutes of cinematic explanation? Would you ever expect Bomberman to say, quote, "My body feels heavy, rigid and cold. What am I doing in this place?" The game misses its mark so badly that it just becomes hilarious almost as soon as you hit the start button. Bomberman is questioning his very purpose in life. Bomberman is literally having a midlife crisis. Just lay the bombs down and stop thinking so hard. As if this weren't enough, the gameplay is shallow and doesn't feel right. The futuristic presentation is definitely what completely kills the fun mood though. Enemies now realistically scream as they blow up and die. It's really loud and really annoying. Add cheesy sound effects, long load times, a techno-metal soundtrack, and an annoying computer robot voice that tells you what to do, and guess what? You have just ruined everything that made the classic series so great. Critics and fans were united in their hatred for this game. Games Radar, The Guardian, and Game Trailers all gave it negative awards and reviews. Konami learned from their mistake and quietly pretended like this game never existed. When they released Bomberman Live for the Xbox 360 the next year, the game ditched the Halo meets Metroid motif and went back to the original style. 2. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2. The original Star Wars The Force Unleashed was pretty amazing for its time. Aside from its killer gameplay, the story was really original and a must-play for Star Wars fans. It was really cool controlling a third powerful Jedi that was not Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader. When the sequel came along, gamers couldn't wait for the next exciting chapter. Instead, what they got was extremely underwhelming. Some aspects of combat were slightly improved, but this version feels like a one-button spam fest. By that, I mean you should get ready to use the same moves and watch the same animations for hundreds of times. The enemies are so easy to fight that there usually is very little reason to change up your fighting style at all. Other than that, the game's story is unforgivably boring. In The Force Unleashed 1, Darth Vader and other important characters all get a lot of screen time. In the second one, nothing important happens at all, and none of the characters are memorable. Most players can breeze through the game in under 8 hours without trying very hard. The majority of gamers, however, turn this game off before they could reach the end. The thin and watery plotline were just too much to handle, especially when compared to the first one. If there's one series where players don't want you to skimp out on the plot, then Star Wars is probably it. 1. StarFox Adventures. StarFox Adventures originally started as a completely different game. Its developers at Rare had an extremely good relationship with Nintendo, having made hits such as Donkey Kong Country and GoldenEye 007. They had just finished up on Diddy Kong Racing and were working on an N64 game called Dinosaur Planet, which follows 2 dinosaur siblings as they try to rescue their dino dad, when Nintendo and Rare held a meeting to see how Dinosaur Planet was coming along. StarFox creator Shigeru Miyamoto noticed that a character called Saber looked a lot like StarFox. He suggested that Rare should make this the next game in the StarFox series, and Rare agreed to completely revamp the title and release the title for the GameCube as StarFox Adventures. When the game was released, longtime fans could hardly believe what they were seeing. Here is a StarFox game without flying. Not only that, but you don't even see StarFox until way later in the game. It seemed nearly inconceivable at the time. The game sold fairly well, but has since earned a reputation as being the worst in the entire series. Thanks for checking out this video. Since you watched the whole thing, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. Subscribe as well if you want, since we upload a new gaming countdown each week. See ya!